Before starting any serious original art project, what I do is create a whole bunch of sketches and see which ones fit, which ones don't. In fact, if you're doing handwork like blacksmithing or carving, you have to always sketch no matter what. The Practical Blacksmith, a collection of essays from the 19th century, somewhere in the middle has an article that a good blacksmith has to have a sketch pad with him and sketch all the time because drawing an idea out trains your mind to see it in the material before you even make it. All the great artists, even sculptors like Michelangelo, had an extensive background in painting and sketching. And so do I. In fact, I'm classically trained by the European school in painting and drawing. So what I do is I take off-white paper. I really like the brown color paper because it creates my midtones, and start with a pencil, generally cutting out the form with haphazard lines. Once the form is already in my mind, I can start refining what is on the paper by closely filling in the details and thinking about the idea. This kind of thinking about a project, thinking about it as you're drawing it, is much more effective in solidifying the vision for the piece you're currently making. To flesh out the overall design and the idea for this sword, I had some help from Peter Johnson in our correspondence. He suggested me to work more with abstract forms and textures rather than my usual style, which is entirely representational. Even though my background is painting, I try not to rely on it too much because one of the main problems I have is that I'm working essentially in metal, gems, and wood, ivory, what have you. However, when you draw something out on paper and paint it with watercolor or oils, it might look amazing in 2 dimensions, but mediocre at best once you actually try to create it in the material you intend to. So you have to always check what the limitations of your final materials are versus the illusion that the paper creates. When people ask me to teach them classes in engraving or sculpting or blacksmithing, I always tell them beforehand, invest your time in drawing. And don't just try to copy drawings from photographs. Try going out into nature, into reality outside, and draw from life. One of the key reasons is you're not practicing drawing itself, you're practicing a certain way of seeing the world where you are forced to study how a form exists out there, showing the mass, showing the reflections of the light, instead of a photograph. The reasoning process is when you're drawing, let's say, a portrait or a building or a dagger, what have you, is you converting 3D reality into a 2D plane using your mind. So your mind is actually collapsing one of the dimensions and transferring it onto paper. So that is a lot of mental work because you have to choose your cues, the ones you're showing, the ones you're not showing. And because you're forcing yourself to do all that mental work, it actually trains your brain into seeing objects in their completeness. However, when you're drawing from photograph onto paper, you're converting a 2D image into another 2D image. It is much easier and therefore less rewarding because you're skipping the entire point of the exercise. Here's an analogy. Imagine you go into a gym. However, instead of lifting weights, you buy a forklift and have the forklift lift the weights for you. And then somehow you're not satisfied. Why didn't you gain any muscle? Even though what you see on paper is in a sense its own complete work of art, it is still the first step to what lies ahead.